Hello, Tadeo.
Nania.
I have questions from our viewers.
All right.
The first question is about genetics of the elementals. Do they have genetics that are comparable to ours? And could a human be hybridized with them?
No. You must understand that elementals, for the most part, present themselves, solidify, crystallize themselves at a moment's notice out of what might be poetically referred to as the clay of the collective consciousness. They can reabsorb themselves, so to speak, into the collective consciousness field and then crystallize or project themselves through that field, made out of that consciousness energy field, electromagnetic energy, when they focus themselves that way to present themselves in any kind of form or shape. While they are crystallized, they may take on a kind of representation of DNA to hold that shape, but it's not the same as the DNA that you experience in your physical form, exactly. So in order for any kind of DNA or genetic material to be taken from an elemental when they are in what appears to be solid form, they would actually have to be slightly densified even further. Then it's possible that DNA can be taken, but again, it is relatively ephemeral, relatively changing all the time, fluctuating in a way that, if not vibrationally compatible with a physical being, by going through some kind of a harmonic stabilization process, could actually wind up being very detrimental to the physical being, because the elemental sample of DNA would still be fluctuating in a way that may cause the physical DNA chains to break apart. So it is not recommended.
Okay. Um, this question is about dogs and how they get lost in smelling things outdoors. And are they actually connecting with elementals when they're doing that?
Well, not all the time, no. They can sometimes, just like several animals on your planet can, sense the idea of elemental consciousness and focus on it. But generally speaking, you would have to take it on a moment to moment, case by case basis in terms of what it is they are sensing.
Okay. And cats also can connect with elementals, I would imagine.
In many cases, cats can see them almost any time they wish. The idea, of course, is it depends on what they're focused on. But yes, cats' senses are a little bit more attuned to the idea of the elemental vibration. It's within their range of senses on more occasions than not.
Okay. I noticed that children, when they are young, they're really into like fairy houses and elves and things like that. And they will even wait to see fairies. But as they get older, they stop and they aren't interested anymore because they think they're not real anymore. What's the cause of that in our society?
Well, you have actually said it yourself in the question. They are taught out of believing that those things are real, and therefore they shut down that portion of their ability to sense it. Plus, it can sometimes be important for them to not necessarily pay attention to that level of reality so much anymore, to allow themselves to focus on the themes they chose to explore as physical beings. But it just again depends upon their theme, it depends upon the person. But in this time of opening the senses and remembering who you are, you can now begin to reconnect while not necessarily losing focus on the theme that you chose to experience in physical reality, because now many of those themes contain the concept of seeing beyond the physical realm, knowing that there are other levels of consciousness there that you can communicate and connect to. So these attributes can be brought back, but many people will have the requirement of a kind of process to unlearn what it is they learned that prevents them from being able to perceive those kinds of levels of reality.
Yes, I guess in a sense it's not unusual that they back away from that idea to integrate better with society, so to speak, or their friends and peers. And then at some point they may come back to it and remember how connected they were
Yes,
earlier in life.
yes,
Um, does Willa have any human ancestors on Earth now?
yes. Not going to name names if that's what you're asking.
I didn't ask it.
I understand, and I wasn't referring to you.
Okay. And do all beings go through a type of life review when they die?
For the most part, yes, it's quite common because the whole idea is to utilize the experience that you gained by having a physical reality experience, adding it to your knowledge of self and expansion of self so that you can decide what to choose next. So it's relatively common. There are a few exceptions, but they're rare.
So when a Sasani being goes through life review, how would that be different from a human life review?
Well, it would only be different in kind. It wouldn't be different in structure necessarily. The idea, again, being that, like you, we focus on our experiences, the consequences of choices made, the effects that it may have had on a variety of different people, places, things, so on and so forth. And we, again, learn from a different perspective of that. We have a different experience of it now from that new point of view. That, again, as I said, we add to ourselves and our understanding of what it is we may choose to experience next.
And also, as humans, when we go through life review, we actually experience any pain and suffering we've inflicted upon other people as if it's happening to us. Is that correct?
Intentionally applied, yes. Unintentionally, not necessarily.
Okay. So in your civilization, of course, people never behave like that. So they would never encounter that in their life review, as opposed to a human who probably does hurt other people in the course of their lifetime.
Yes, generally speaking. Again, there may be rare exceptions for a variety of reasons, but generally speaking, we do not experience the idea of the negativity.
Okay. Um, do animals, when they're coming to the end of their physical existence, do they get to choose when they leave like humans do? Or is it, or, if they're being hunted or whatever, is this all part of their choice, or it's happening at another level, and at the physical level, they just simply want to survive continuously?
In a sense, it's a choice from a higher level, although animals, because of their connection to nature and because of their willingness to allow synchronicity to occur in the way that it naturally does, will not necessarily have to make a choice beyond the choice they made before incarnation. They will simply trust the timing of the idea of their experience of physical reality and may be open to many different pathways by which they may leave physical reality, again, based on what appears to be the synchronous randomness of different events as it occurs and as it serves all other beings that are experiencing life on the planet.
And in general, since so often many of them are eaten in one way or another, do they come in with a deeper commitment to being of service in that sense, a more willingness to participate as opposed to human attitudes about being killed and eaten and things like that?
To some degree, yes. Although to put it in the framework of willingness is a little bit different because that's a human perspective. So again, it's more of a deep understanding of how things work on the particular level that they are experiencing. And they are simply open to the idea without, shall we say, examining the pros and cons that would then lead to the concept you're talking about called willingness. They simply go with the flow of the reality, knowing that in whatever way, shape, or form it unfolds, it serves the best of all concerned for a variety of reasons they don't even necessarily have to be aware of.
So when we go in the forest, what is a good way to connect with nature spirits?
Well, Willa has begun to give you certain kinds of ideas and exercises to be able to begin to enhance your senses in that way. That, in some sense, is what the cryptic meditations and the cryptic process is all about. So, by, again, as always, of course, following the formula we have shared with all of you, and by focusing a little bit more, especially now on this latest chapter of the cryptic meditation, where you begin to connect with animals, and that will prepare you more strongly, more, shall we say, energetically, for the next phase, that is connecting to the elemental path, which shall happen in the fall. So you are already being given a particular pathway, a particular process from Willa to be able to enhance your ability to sense and commune with the idea of the elemental beings. But now, at this phase, you are going through the animals first, since they already have the connection to the idea of the elementals in most cases, especially in what you call the wild. By connecting with them, you're going to pick up many of the attributes that they already contain that they will vibrationally pass along to you, that gives them the ability to commune with those elementals.
And how can we learn to communicate telepathically with animals?
Again, it is mostly through the concept of the deep feeling and imagery that you can create in your mind to project to them. That can be the beginning of it, is think in pictures, not in words. See the idea happening in your mind with deep feeling attached to it, deep emotion. This is one of the things that the idea of the second phase of the animal path is all about, is to truly be in love with the animals that you connect with. Truly feel this deeply in your heart and in your soul and in your spirit and in your mind, like family, true connections, true bonds, like family, deeply in love, and then add pictures to that of the idea that you wish to see in the communion as it can take place. But while you're doing that, be very aware also at the same time of any belief systems you may have that are fear-based, so that you can let them go, and so they will not, in a sense, stop the process of the connection that you are making.
And to some degree, if you're familiar with doing meditation or listening to music and going into an altered state of consciousness, then that could also be useful in putting you in the proper state to be able to communicate using pictures and things like that.
If that permission slip works for you, then yes, absolutely, you can use that slip.
Yeah, so the idea is find your permission slips also that will enhance your altered state to be able to receive the information.
Yes.
Okay. Do elementals act as guardians for certain locations?
In some sense, yes. They will create a vibrational bubble that will interact with anyone entering that particular field in a way that allows the person to either feel that they can go forward or should go back.
And then what elementals that seem to be near waterfalls and rivers and things like that, how can you expand the connection with those kinds of elementals? Is it different than, say, trees or, well, actually, trees are not elementals, but
No, but they may be associated with elementals as well.
right.
So again, it just depends upon what you're attracted to do. The basic techniques we've already talked about are the same. It's just a matter of how you feel about that connection and what kind of imagery you can bring up in your mind that makes that connection more plausible.
And it seems like a lot of it is the willingness to just be still and receive information instead of chattering in your mind,
Yes.
which then blocks the communication from coming.
That's why we said it's got to be the idea of feelings and pictures more than the idea of words.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean that words can't sometimes work, but again, this will happen naturally if they're necessary.
And one person was experiencing elementals requesting an offering be made to the forest. Can you elaborate on why that might be? Or
Because to give is to receive. In other words, in any kind of a relationship or communication, there does need to be some expression of willingness of exchange. So the idea is simply one way of interpreting the concept of the giving of yourself, the offering of a gift, shows your willingness to have a commitment, your willingness to have a relationship, for you are also asking to receive something.
And can you elaborate on why Willa has two hearts?
The hybridization that occurred in certain genetic lineages led to a more efficient system of storing oxygen in the body for the purpose of accessing higher frequency domains and information. The oxygenation of the body is of paramount importance in speeding up the vibrational resonance of the physical form and having the idea of not exactly two hearts, but more chambers in the heart than you have that makes it function as if it's doubled, allows for a more efficient distribution of oxygen throughout the system, and also a greater amount of oxygen throughout the system. That then increases the probability of raising the frequency to the exact pitch required for easier connection to higher frequency realms of consciousness and other dimensions of experience.
So just like when Daryl does deep breathing in order to make the connection with you, the idea is that she has a much higher level of oxygen in her system than we do.
Yes, and this is also why we have mentioned from time to time that there is more oxygen on our planet in the atmosphere. Not a lot, but enough that it allows for the stabilization of that frequency to be common.
Okay. Is there a way that you can support elementals in this time of planetary transition, since they seem to have an important role in keeping the Earth in balance?
Well, in a sense, the idea of taking on the role from your side of keeping the earth in balance and doing the things that will help stabilize the environment in positive ways, increasing the idea of the natural world and making those connections from your side will be something that will also allow them more opportunity to do so from their side. So the whole idea of making the connection with them and taking actions in your reality that are more representative of enhancing the environment, stabilizing the environment in a more natural way, is what you can do from your side while they do what they do from their side. It's not entirely up to them. This has to be a relationship. It has to be, in a sense, a 50-50 proposition.
It just occurred to me that the connection that elementals experience with Earth and nature is a profoundly deep love affair, in a sense.
Yes.
And that the more that you love Earth and you love all the elements of Earth, the more you are putting yourself in a state that's similar to what an elemental might experience.
Exactly. And therefore, like we have said with regard to extraterrestrial contact, you have to meet them halfway. You have to bring your vibrational frequency at least much closer to the level that they operate on in order for you to perceive them and in order for you to interact with them in the ways that will allow for the acceleration of the balance of the natural world of Earth.
Now, one person had an experience where they were with a grove of trees and suddenly shifted to a parallel reality where they realized that the forest is inhabited with tree people. In other words, the people of the forest are the trees, and that they are a community that has very strong bonds, and they're also very welcoming of the human consciousness.
That's why we say that the trees are, in a sense, the ambassadors between humans and the natural world. because they're connected to the idea of physical humans, they're connected to the idea of the elementals, and in a sense, they act as the go between. So they're always welcoming you into their reality to act as, well, for lack of a better term, brokers between the two different civilizations of human and elemental. That's the common bond. That's the common frequency. That's the common interface, are the trees.
So they experience each other as individual consciousnesses
And collective, both.
and a collective at the same time. And they have young people and old people, and it's just it's a community of being.
It is. But again, when you say young people and old people, we understand what you mean in terms of time and the growth of trees.
Yeah.
But don't assign a human perspective to that because they don't see it exactly in that way. Remember that they can perceive things in parallel realities in multiple dimensions a little bit differently than you can. And the idea of young and old has a particular perspective to them, but it's not exactly the human perspective.
And yet you need the older trees in a forest in order to share their energy with the younger trees.
Yes, yes. But again, all we're simply saying is the terminology that you're using, the definitions that you're using, have a particular human bent to them that is not experienced exactly in the same way by the tree consciousness.
And one last thing about trees, that they seem to have a very generous spirit in general.
Yes.
It's, and their genetics are actually more complex than ours,
Yes.
correct? So
Yes.
they are actually highly evolved beings in
Yes.
many respects.
Yes. In fact, the very idea that they are apparently to you immobile requires the extra genetics and the extra abilities because they can't move away from things like humans can. Therefore, they have to have more adaptability to a variety of situations, hence a more complex genetic structure.
And they communicate with each other chemically, so they let each other know that there's a danger or all kinds of communication
Yes.
that happens.
Yes, yes.
So it's very sophisticated, and yet it's hidden to human consciousness unless you shift your vibration to be able to perceive what is actually happening.
Yes, but it's not hidden on purpose. It is simply the idea of the limitations that human consciousness has placed on itself. Because long ago, when humans were much more connected in their understanding of their expression of nature, it wasn't hidden at all. It was understood very clearly.
So that would be Native Americans, Lemurians, those beings were much more
Early Atlanteans, yes. And not leaving out the idea of people in other parts of your planet, because many of them also had a more natural way of relating to nature.
Yes, I think almost every continent had its share of shamanic
Yes.
beings that were connecting with
Yes,
nature.
yes, yes. And it was much more common in those societies to understand those things as natural.
Now, one person has a boa constrictor and he wants to know how to communicate with that being and if it's possible to create a relationship and an emotional connection between a reptilian being, and I'm talking about actual reptile, and human.
Well, of course it is. So again, many of the things we've already said will apply as well. The idea of the deep emotional bond, the idea of using imagery instead of words. The reptile will also assist you in understanding exactly how to frame those images, how to frame those emotions in its context, in its quote unquote language.
So you're basically saying be the snake, and then you will know how to talk to the snake.
In essence, yes, and the snake will help you if it really senses a deep willingness and a deep bond in your consciousness that wishes to do so. So again, this is why it's so important to have that deep, loving, vibrational, harmonic bond, because then the being will sense that you really desire a connection and will help you with that connection by sending the imagery and the feelings as well that will help you understand how to focus in on its particular way of creating a communication.
Okay, I think that's helpful. Um, let's see. I'm going to switch over to a question having to do with the precursors.
Yes.
And we wanted to give you an opportunity to clarify the idea of whether precursors were actually born here on the planet or whether they are actually
Yes.
extraterrestrial.
We understand that there may have been a slip in translation when we first talked about that concept. And this is why we have recently begun to talk about people born on the planet who have similar hybridized genetics to precursors as being preparers rather than calling themselves precursors. Precursor, by definition, is something that comes before something else. And therefore, since you're already on the planet, you can't be precursors because you're not coming to the planet, you're on the planet. But you can be preparers. And the preparers can exhibit some of the same vibrational frequencies as the precursors. But precursors are born off the planet. They are hybrids from off the planet, are not born on Earth. Who is born on Earth are preparers. We apologize for any confusion in translation.